All right, if you're ready to get started, we'll just go ahead and kick off. This is nothing formal. This is all informal, or informal, I should say. That's the right way of saying that word. So I do grammar very well when I was in school. So, hey, glad you turned out tonight. We're just going to keep the pictures kind of scrolling so you can just keep seeing different shots. You'll see all the other guys with the big old boa constrictor over them. I did the king cobra around my neck is what I did. So that's the reason you don't see a picture of me up there with it. But yeah, no, not really. There was a king cobra, and that thing was huge.
I have it right here. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Don't let him lie to you.
You got it, huh?
Don't let the pastor lie to you. I know. You just have to take it in faith.
Here are a few items up here in case afterwards you want to come and look at some things. One of their main products is copper, and so that was a plate that I got, and it's of Zambia along with the giraffe and different things like that. So, and then there's some other wood carvings that are done by the people and paintings and stuff like that. On our last day there, they presented every one of us with a piece of cloth, and from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is covered in wax.
It's a waxed chitenge, which they use as a robe or a skirt, things like that. Well, it's waxed, so it's waterproof,
Yeah.
So that you don't get wet and things like that.
So anyway, that's up here if you want to see that. There may be a picture even of one of the guys that actually wrapped it around himself like a chitenge, but I didn't. I don't do that. So anyway. And then the other thing is, we have the Zambia wall out there, and I found this of a church, and this was handmade, woven by somebody. And so we went to a street vendor, and basically is where we bought everything. You would go around and shop, decide what you wanted, and then you would go to the owner and you'd haggle over the price. And they expected you to haggle over the price, and so you would haggle over the price and decide on a final amount. It's amazing what you can buy over there. It really is for the price. Let me see, a kwacha is worth $19.20?
1 to 19.20. One U.S. dollar is $19.20 there.
In kwacha, yeah. So it's pretty amazing the difference in price over there. And the people speak Bemba is what they mainly speak, at least in the Zambian regions we were in. And then also most of them speak English. I'd say all the kids probably in your class spoke a lot of English. Well, even your class was English. So if you don't mind, I think what I'm going to do is just let everybody kind of share a little bit. A lot of this is the classrooms where Amy and Phil and Lincoln were located. I think there's a few shots of Ryan and Hayden that were teaching the high school discipleship class in the big building. And notice some of the houses are red. That's the old termite bricks that they handmade and cured and dried. And now they've started making cinder blocks that you'll see. That's what the new worship center dining hall that we met in. It's a large facility you'll see with a lot of people up on the stage and different things. Those are out of cinder block, and then they've got tin roofs. And so they're becoming more and more sophisticated, and the stuff they're using is a lot more long-lasting than the old stuff was back in the day. And then you'll also see, I had to get a picture of the chicken coop for Gym Day, so he would see the chicken coop and see all of that. So when we got over there, they said most of their chickens had been killed or they'd eaten or whatever, and so we were, like I told you this morning, we were able to buy them several others, and then they bought some just for us when we arrived to be butchered, and so the lady spent most of the morning butchering chickens and getting them all cooked up and fried and ready for us and all of that, which they fed everybody, but just not us. But they did butcher, I don't know how many, must have been like 50 or 75 chickens at least that they brought in. So
I saw a 55-gallon drum
55
full of chickens.
Okay, yeah. So
they had 2 grills going at the same time.
Yeah.
There were
Some of the pictures you'll see also are pictures. That's the baptistry right there. That's up there on the screen. The baptistry had to be hand-filled by water. They did cold water, and then they also heated some water. So I guess it was somewhat warm from what Dan said. So that's the baptistry they have on the George compound. They don't have a baptistry on the Labudo ground at all, and so this is a luxury for them. This is the reserve that we went to, or We thought we were going to see all kinds of wildlife, and we saw deer, deer, and deer. And we didn't see a warthog.
We saw a
That's true, we did
warthog
see it.
sprinting full speed across the plain. So that was pretty cool.
We saw a kitty cat.
We
So it was
did.
the only lion, you know.
They had a kitty cat.
So that's how brave Lincoln was. So yeah. It looked worse than it was. Yeah, it kind of freaked you out to look at it. Then once you touched it, it was no big deal. So yeah. So anyway, but the deer was really cool, and we didn't see any zebra, didn't see any giraffes. Yeah, saw monkeys, and then we saw the snakes. Yeah, yeah, that's a king cobra.
They had this lovely exhibit next to the boa constrictor of the most poisonous snakes in Africa, with broken glass and in a little cubby, and you're just kind of like, there's a black mamba. There's nothing stopping it from killing me.
Anybody else want to share? Go ahead, jump in there, guys. Sorry if I can talk all day.
So some of the pictures you see up here, I took a lot of these pictures. These buildings, they don't even look like you should be able to live in them. In fact, in the United States, they would probably all be condemned. Just dirt floors, and the, you know, a lot of times the windows didn't even have glass in them. And one of the things that I noticed right off was all the children that didn't have the uniforms on. You know, they knew where the property line was. They would stand on the edge of the hedgerows, and some of them were just a little bit taller than the hedgerows, and they would look at the camp, and they would see all of our children, the Bethlehem Christian Academy children, just playing and running, and they looked with envy. In fact, I didn't not give them hugs or high fives. It only took a day or two, and they were following me into the camp, and I wanted so much to just give them all the food in my backpack, and to go get them food and feed them, but we weren't allowed to feed them, and I didn't quite understand that until we went to a remote village to show the Jesus film. And on the second night, there was a lady. I don't remember her name. That was making the balloon animals. She brought all the balloons. Kelly. And so my wife Amy couldn't make it tonight. She's feeling a little under the weather. But she chipped in, and she started helping making balloons, and there was a lot of people making balloons in the church, and they started giving them away to the children, and it got to where the kids, they don't have nothing, you know. They will take a stick and an old wooden wheel and put a string around it and lead it down the street, you know, like a makeshift toy, you know. And so they got to where they were fighting over the balloons, and then so now, looking back, I understood, you know, why I couldn't feed the kids that weren't in the camp, because they were so hungry that they would literally have fought over the food. And I couldn't believe how happy they were with empty stomachs, you know. And when I got back, I took my wife out to dinner, and the meal cost more than what it would feed and clothe and school and help pay for one of the teachers to do that for a whole month. And that's what I couldn't believe either, that just $72 would take one of those kids that wore this. It was easy to recognize them. They wore the same clothes every day, all week. And they don't have any more clothes than what they were wearing, as far as I know. And just $72 would feed them and give they eat one meal a day, and they fed us like kings over there. We had 3 meals a day, and I literally felt guilty about having breakfast in the morning before we would go over to the camp, and then just knowing that their only meal was in the middle of the day, and that was all the nourishment they had, and it's enough because they were healthy and they were so full of energy and running, and um, what over here in the United States, we go out and we spend $50,000 on a Jeep so we can take it off roading and go rock climbing. Over there, their roads uh, are worse than any rock climbing road that you would want to go on with a Jeep, and we went down it with buses, and you can't even call them a road. There's not gravel. The red dirt is still embedded in the welt of my boot, and in the cracks of the leather, and I can't imagine what was like what it's like to live that way over there. Sean? So in Africa, in Zambia, my understanding is many of the parents are not alive. Um, we drove by this gravesite every day. I think we went by at least 4 or 5 times, and there were men out there hand digging graves. And from my understanding, so many of the parents have died from AIDS. And I think just I am not the expert to tell you what it's like there, but just it's so remote. I think when you get sick, I just think you die. You don't just call 911 and 5 minutes later an ambulance shows up. You either get better or you die. You know, and so many of these children, they might only have one parent, or they might be living with other relatives or other family members. But however they're living, I've seen their villages. They're, I've seen the place that they call home, and I think the worst camping trip you could imagine, would be better than how these children live.
So I'll draw a little contrast here. So the Bethlehem Christian Academy abuts up against the village of George, right? And when one of the places that Tracy and I and the family were out in rural ministry in the United States was near the town of Colby. Now, Colby had maybe, I think, about 5,000 people, right? Colby, Kansas. And if you go to Colby, it's got a Starbucks, it's got a McDonald's, it's got a Walmart. I mean, it's just 5,000 people. It's got highways going through and to and fro. It's got a beautiful courthouse, classic courthouse, the style they used to build back in the late 1800s. And it's a beautiful town, well kept, a lot of houses in good shape. George, by contrast, has about the same population, about 5,000 people, has a bunch of different houses. Some of the houses are really big. Like there were a couple of really big houses that would look good in my neighborhood, right? But most of the houses, you saw, there were some kids, and there was a little block building behind the kids. We saw that just a little bit ago. That was a house. And that might have been for a family of 8, right? However big the family might have been inside that one little house. Saw the red dirt paths going through George, and you'll see it again as this is actually on the campus, I think. But then we'll see George as we go through again. So George has no roads, no pavement, no tar, no nothing, no gravel roads. It's all just dirt paths going amongst these houses where about 5,000 people live. And that's the degree of advancement. Now, the weird thing is, like as Pastor mentioned this morning, just about everybody has a cell phone. And that's actually how they do any banking they do is with their cell phones. It's all done with a cell phone. I don't understand quite how it works, but they've got these little huts on the side of the road in town. Oh, here's some of the wildlife. What are those? A water buck, I think. Yeah. Elon, those are Elon. Yeah. Elon tastes pretty good. That's what I had for lunch that day. Yeah. I have no idea how that thing works, but we do that here in America too, in urban areas, right? People have kids eat one meal a day, maybe at school, and yet they have a $500, $700 cell phone that they carry around. I don't get that sort of thing, but I don't want to comment on it.
I also don't know about Zambia specifically, but there's often a lot of relief programs to equip families with that technology because it opens up skill training and all sorts of things. And so they very likely could have been gifted. But the same thing here, right? You can go buy a cell phone at Walmart for $80. It's not a nice cell phone, but you can go do it. Paying food for your kid for a month, it's going to be more than that. And so the cell phone opens up a whole world of possibility. But, if you're down on your luck here, you go and get a job at McDonald's. If you have good luck there, you may have a job, period. Most of the families, you ask the kids, like, hey, what do your families do? Nothing. They work at home. They'll grow a garden and things like that.
Sorry, Ryan, but that's a house back there, okay? Find those kids.
Yeah, that little 5x5 shack is a house. But the reality is most of them, there's not a job available for them. Andrea? There's that. Some of them have more opportunity than others. And you see that inequality even in the village, even among the village kids or the kids at BCA and things like that. So for those who can travel a couple hours a day, one of my high school students walks 2 hours to BCA every morning. One of them walked 60 seconds. One of them walked 2 hours to school every day. And so just quite the range.
So most of the farming is done by hand there, right? So you literally see guys out there with basically a hoe working a field. Now, we don't really do that here in America anymore. We have gigantic machines that we do our farming with, but they don't even have gas, and sometimes they'll have access to draft animals like cows to plow the fields. So there's a lot of farming that's on a small field basis that's going to happen around there. And BCA actually employs a lot of people. There are a lot of the people who have their children there, even though the children are there by sponsorship, so the parents don't have to pay the school. They work for the school, or they do sometimes piecework labor for the school, and so they earn some money that way. And so farming, I guess, some in the little tiny fields that they have, maybe it seems like the school kind of stimulates the economy around there. So praise the Lord for that. But yeah, it's not a rich place. It's just not. Sponsorship. So you sponsor a child for $72 a month, and that basically takes care of the whole cost of the child: food, clothing, the education, the loaded costs for the teachers, and so on. All of the utilities, whatever utilities are being used, and so on. That's all encompassed in that $72. The sponsors actually choose them.
Exactly. Yeah, the parents will apply to the school for their child to be a part, and then BCA leadership will actually interview and make decisions, which I cannot imagine how difficult it is. I think they had, 20 maybe kindergartners that they're adding into the school this year, and how in the world do you choose 20 kindergartners out of possible 100 or 150 kindergartners that applied for the school? But again, they've got to kind of pick and choose. Sometimes it's one child out of a family of children that is actually accepted into the home, those kinds of things. So it's a tough call, because George Village, I mean, we saw hundreds and thousands of children, and yet BCA only has, 250, I think,
Yeah.
on compound, at George compound right now. So that's just the southern campus.
I don't know the full criteria, and I don't think any of us do the full criteria of choosing, but what I do know is only one kid per family. If you have 5 kids, only one of them will ever go to BCA because there's so much need. If you had 2 kids going to BCA, you're now favored and special and now really a target, right? Oh, you have 2 kids and you're shunned for that because you're so privileged for that. And so it's a dog-eat-dog world.
So I'm not stumping for BCA right now, but if the Lord is
Yeah,
moving
you
your
are.
heart and you think that you would like to look into this, there are definitely opportunities to sponsor children. I'm already sponsoring children through other ministries. One of the children I'm sponsoring is going to roll off. I'm going to roll that into BCA next year because it was so powerfully touching to be there and to see the work that they're doing and to see what they're doing for these kids.
You can go to www.bethlehemchristianacademy.com. Just make sure you go to the West Plains site in order to get the site that you need in order to find what kids need sponsoring. You don't have to sponsor a child for $72. You can just do 36. You can do half of a sponsorship, and then somebody else, either in the state of Missouri or around the United States, will sponsor the other half of that child. So if $72 hinders you from sponsoring a child, just do 36, and that helps a great deal.
And I think they actually prefer the 36 because you're more likely to keep it going. If you do 72 a month, that's a lot. Even for a lot of us, that's a lot to commit to month after month after month. And they have lots of half donors, so you're not less of a donor by doing 36. And they have the main campus that we were at this week, the northern campus in Zambia, which George went to on his last trip, which if you thought the conditions at George were poor, that one's worse. And then they're also beginning campuses in Senegal, and they're working on India too, I believe. And so Senegal is a especially unique opportunity because it's a Muslim area. So it's a huge ministerial opportunity there.
So that's the hospital. That's not part of the BCA campus. It's going to be a separate ministry. And as Phil mentioned, if you fall sick and you can get somebody to take you into town, you might be able to get medical care. But the government actually is very encouraging about this hospital project. And so they're just building a hospital. And part of their model is they're going to have missionary doctors. There are doctors and dentists and so on that's how they do their vacations. They go overseas to a place like Zambia, and they go do medical work in a place like that. This particular hospital, we talked a lot about this and about there's going to be a women's clinic and it's going to be OBGYN, and there was a lot of strong talk about this being really a pro-life clinic. It's not going to, they're not going to let the world or any kind of organization force them into being anything other than a pro-life clinic. And what that means is that people in George will have access to medical care within a walking distance, which will be the first time ever for them.
It's not a ministry of BCA, but it's attached. So Pastor Victor, who's the chairman of BCA, is also the push or the head behind the hospital project as well. So organizationally different, is a government-backed hospital, but led locally through that ministry.
What I love about Zambia is I can be myself. And what I mean is I'm pretty much an open book. So my wife says I say way too much. I tell people way too much information. And when we arrived in Zambia, a lot of mission trips, you can't tell them exactly what you're doing. But in Zambia, we could tell them everything that we are doing. And the reason that is because Zambia is a Christian nation. They say that they're a Christian nation. Also, their language of choice is English. From my understanding, there's 72 other languages, and the second most spoken language that everyone is supposed to know or knows or understands is Bimba. But the language of choice in Zambia is English, and they claim to be a Christian nation. And it might be sad to say it, but I believe that they are probably more pro-life than the United States right now. And it felt good to be able to tell them, I'm here on a mission trip. I'm here to spread the gospel, and I went on one other mission trip, and it was actually I did it before I was married. I did it at 31 years old, and you would think it was the freest country besides the United States. I went to London, England, with the Jesus Film Project, and when I arrived there, I got off the plane after that long plane ride, and I go up there, and there's immigration officers to let you in, to let you out of Heathrow Airport. Just gonna be 1 minute, and I'm going off on a side trail here, but there was this British guy, and then another British guy, and then there was this Muslim lady with a full head covering, and I I got her. I walked right up to her, and I told her I was there to pass out Bibles on the streets of London, and we were there actually to pass them out to Muslims. And long story short, I got held for 6.5 hours. I got fingerprinted. I'm on Interpol. They went through my wallet. They asked me every question you can imagine, from how much is on this credit card or how much is on this debit card. And then at the end of the 6.5 hours, I was deported and escorted to a plane and left and landed back in Newark, New Jersey. And that was 15 years ago. And it was one of the reasons I wasn't going to go on a mission trip ever again. I was just going to stay in the middle of Missouri, in the middle of freedom, and cling to my Bible and my guns. But but God had different plans, and unfortunately, so Stacy got hurt, and my wife was kind of distraught. That was going to be her support, and so I stepped up to the plate, and I said, let me see if I can go. And within a week and a half, he contacted Ephraim. He was in India, and he said, well, I'll get back to you when I get a hold of him. He's in India. And Ephraim got the plane tickets changed. And then on Wednesday, and then we found that out. I talked to him Sunday, and on Wednesday I went in and talked to my boss and said, hey, mind if I go to Africa last minute for 12 days? And he pulls it up on the computer, and he says, well, you got the vacation time. Yeah, go for it, And so God sent me to Africa when it wasn't even on my radar. And I cannot believe how he used everybody that was over there. And I think my son Lincoln wanted to share a little bit. He's 10 years old, and he got to play with kids his age, and he got to experience life as no American kid has ever experienced, I believe. Not many.
Well, this morning, Pastor George was talking about you have a choice to go to heaven and hell, right? Well, my dad was talking about that one day, and everybody chose to go to heaven. That day, everybody chose to be saved. That's all I have.
So let me just, Kathy.
Learning Bemba or trying the food. One of those. Or trying the food.
So the team that, to me, the big impact was the missionary work that we did, right? So it could easily be the case that you go somewhere foreign, right, on a mission trip, and it really is more of a kind of a tourist thing, right? It's just something you do because it's exotic and it's kind of an adventure and so on. And I've never been on a mission trip before because I wanted to avoid exactly that possibility. but I was not disappointed on this trip. The people who were in the team, fantastic team of people. Just everybody was focused on the ministry. There were a couple of hijinks, but nothing major. Just there was the giant spider incident. And then there was the man wearing the chitenge like a woman just so he could show his wife how to put it on. So a couple little hijinks like that. But really, everybody was super, super focused on the mission. And the pastoral training, the women's ministry was tremendous. It started at like 9:30, I think, and the first morning, and they had 4 people there. And then at 10:30, they had 8 people there. But by midday, they had 140 ladies in that place. And the gospel presentation, that's Zambia time is what that is. And when they gave the gospel presentation, like 40 ladies came forward to receive the Lord. And we just saw that throughout the whole ministry. I think Phil mentioned Chiplakusu, which is a suburb of Ndola. And it's actually within the boundaries of the city of Ndola, which is the kind of capital city of the Copperbelt district there. And that's where the airport is, and that's where that giant stadium that you see is in Ndola. But Chiplakusu, when you start to drive into that neighborhood, the road literally ends, and it ceases to become pavement, and it just becomes dirt. And this is a suburb, right? And it's all just moon dirt, and you're just the bus was doing this, just bouncing along on this road. We went into this place, and we went to a church, and this is the thing that most humbled me. So we went to a church that Victor Chibagula had established, and I think most of you have seen Victor, right? He's been at the church. So he had established a church. It was Paradise Baptist, and one of the men in the pastoral training, Nicholas, he was there. He's the pastor of Paradise Baptist. We did the Jesus Film project there. We did it Thursday night. We did it Friday night. We showed the Jesus Film. We had the gospel invitations, and just anybody know how many kids came?
All of them.
Bunch, all of them, really.
Like,
yeah. So we were
not
so
exaggerating.
So they mobbed the church, and then we're in the church trying to, minister to everybody who came in, and it was just chaos, but wonderful chaos, right? So the first night we arrived there, we brought our food with us, and only no utensils, so we ate it Zambian style, right? Everything with the fingers, right? And so I ended up with my hands, gooey, and so I wanted to wash them, right? Now, that's not a hard problem to solve in America. You just go find a sink and you wash your hands. But I'm walking around saying, can I wash my hands here somewhere? This is a Baptist church, so you have a baptistry. So presumably you have water around here somewhere, right? No, they weren't hooked up to the city water. And I don't know what the water source was, but our guide led us to led me to the pastor's wife. And she literally took a bowl and a cup and poured water over my hands to wash them. And I'm thinking, I am not worthy of this kind of treatment. And it was hugely humbling for me, but I knew that if I would rejected it, it would have offended her. But that's how they live, and not only how they live, but spiritually how they live. They really do. I mean, the servants there are servants. And, yeah, go ahead, Dustin. I'll leave that to the expert.
As my understanding is at the George compound, there's going to be the upcoming kindergarten class, which should be on the website in the coming months. I don't know the timeline on that. But outside of that, all the long-standing students, so first grade and up, basically most all of them have a sponsor. It's the other campuses, and which will be a wide range. But at the main campus there, they're mainly supported. Older kids, you guys would say?
I'm not sure how many
I don't know.
older kids they have to sponsor. You would have to go on the website and find out if there's any older kids that need sponsoring.
Yeah.
Pictures of those that need sponsoring will be on the website.
So to answer your question, I don't think we know if a particular age is less sponsored than another.
This is the first This is the first year they've ever graduated a class, and they actually don't graduate that class until December. I believe it is. And so the kids have the opportunity to go to university in Ndola, Kasama, Lusaka, wherever, if they chose to do that and they have the financial stability to do so. But that's the dream, because they now have computer training. They also have home economics. They have English. They have math. They have all the basics that a child needs. Sean asked a question why the parents don't take care of their children more. It's mainly because of lack of education. Dads can't get jobs because they don't have an education to do any work. And so many of them grow corn in the back field, and they make the corn into moonshine, and they get drunk all day long. We went to do a movie in that city that Christopher was talking about. Ryan played bouncer most of the time because we had a guy that was so stone drunk he wanted to touch all the women, and so Ryan was big enough he could kind of push
The best
guy
part of
away.
that, not only was I playing bouncer with the guy would bow down to me and worship me as Jesus. He would literally bow and call me Jesus. And so that's a fun conversation. Feel a little like Paul, no, we're men too, we're not gods. Drunk out of his mind, he has no clue. I don't think I was the only one he did that to, but he worshiped all sorts of Jesus there.
So I don't know exactly where the education will go with these kids. When they first started, the class was much larger. Now the seniors is a pretty small group.
There are 8 seniors. So I
18.
think they started with, I don't want to say 20, but 10 to 20, somewhere in that range. There's 8 that have been able to stay throughout. You ask most of the high schoolers, they'll say, I want to be a doctor. I want to be this or that. Some of the girls want to be police officers, which is pretty cool. But
So here's my understanding. It was founded in 2011, right? So we're at 12 years. And every year, I believe they accept 25 kindergartners. And if you see any of these pictures and they're wearing green and they got a uniform on, they're sponsored. They're fed. Their stomachs are full. And they are happy. And I think that I believe that they're taken care of no
The-
matter what. I believe that that once they're in the system that they try to keep them in there, and keep them.
if they lose a sponsor, my understanding is they'll float them until another sponsor takes it up.
So let me just, I can't answer your question directly about BCA, about which children are less likely to be sponsored, but from dealing with other organizations that have children's sponsorship, the older the child is, the harder it is to find a sponsor. Males are much harder to sponsor than females. That's a general rule for children's ministry.
Also, the teachers. I talked to one of the teachers. I believe his name is Kunda. I may have. I think I got that right. Anyway, he takes a bus to school every day, and I think it's about a 45-minute to an hour ride. And he gets paid once a month in kwacha. I believe it's the equivalent of about $100 US. And also, from my understanding, it's really good pay for. So I believe the main problem is there are no jobs, and the men have nothing to do but get drunk, and they live in poverty, which is depressing. And so I imagine that the depression and suicide rate and just drink yourself to death rate is unbelievable. And I'm not an expert by any means, but I would say that a homeless person in America might be living like kings compared to these folks.
I mean, if you go on the corner and beg $20 and get that over a course of a day, you're now richer than the teachers at BCA.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we gave those out to the high schoolers on our last day there. Amy got some photos of that. I don't think they made it into the PowerPoint. But you give even the high schoolers, right? You give a kid a gift, it's just like they're going to be happy with it. But high schoolers even here, right? It's just like, oh, you gave me the off-brand Doritos. And they're still teenagers there, but trust me, they're still teenagers there. But each of those kids is just thrilled to receive it. I didn't get to have length conversations with each individual item in there, how each individual item was received, but just the fact that someone was willing to care enough to give them something. I told them that Friday morning, hey, the people of my church have loved you guys so much that they wanted to give you guys a gift, and the rest of the morning, the only conversation is the gift, the gift, the gift, and they're high schoolers. Some of them are 18. I don't remember everything in the gift. There's a fishing kit, a sewing kit. It came in a handcrafted bag. There were hygiene items, toothbrushes, toothpaste, things like that. Is there anything I'm missing? A shirt. There's a T-shirt in each of those, a jump rope made out of recycled T-shirts. And so all of that was in there. And so each of those are a huge blessing to them, right? Just a T-shirt in of itself is a huge blessing, right? It's like, hey, I can change into something else.
And what did you guys pack, 65? And we distributed how many?
62.
62.
Yeah, so I thought we had
Almost
55,
perfect.
and I was like, uh-oh, what am I going to do? But we had enough, and
You got
so
a
they were
question?
blessed. Not that I saw.
I know he's highly revered in Zambia because his heart was removed from his body when he died and was buried down by Livingston Falls. So he's highly revered and appreciated and all that. As far as entering into everyday conversation, there was nothing that I heard while I've been over there many, many times. And Livingston Falls is probably 300 or 400 miles south of where we are. So it's next to impossible to get down to see it on a mission trip or anything like that. But yeah, we for some reason they had trouble getting all the Bibles, so they got 50 Bibles the day we arrived, and that was. The women's conference didn't start till Thursday of that week, so the other Bibles came in that Thursday. So we had all 100 Bibles. So as far as I know, they distributed all the Bibles to the 140 women that were there, as many as could get them, and they all were in Bimba hardback. So the Bibles were made available to all the women that wanted one. The T-shirts for the pastors was distributed also on the last day. We handed out notebooks for leadership church conference for all the pastors, and then on the last day, we gave them all shirts, which they were just thrilled to get a brand new shirt and all of those kinds of things. So they were very appreciative of the shirts that we took over there. I want to say there was like 50 shirts, and we only had 40 pastors attend, and so we had extra that some of them could take more than one. It was amazing. The pastors' conference to me was amazing. Some of them drove all the way from Kasama, which is a 12-hour bus ride, in order to come to this conference for 5 days, sleep on the floor, and get you one meal a day. No shower or anything like that. They had to take sponge baths as they could in the evenings and things like that. I guess I'm impressed. I bellyache about staying at a bad motel, and they didn't have a motel. They slept on the floor, ate whatever food was provided for them, and just really was very appreciative of the conference. We did end up having all the interpreters we had hoped to have, so we were going to have 4 interpreters, 4 different classes for the pastors. We ended up only having 2 interpreters, so we ended up redoing the schedule Monday night and rescheduling everything so 2 interpreters could handle 20 pastors at a time. And so Christopher and all the other pastors led that conference for all the pastors, and they were very appreciative of all that. They probably have about 20, 25 seasoned pastors, and then they had 15 or so that are considering going into the pastorate, or they're serving as interns in their local churches, different fellowships and all of that. I'd have to get with Victor or Ephraim and ask that question because I don't know that for sure because, again, this is the first time they've ever graduated a class, and they won't do that till this coming December. And what is it, 18 is how many's graduating?
8.
8 is graduating, yeah. So
I think in America we're so focused on college, but if we look back, even 100 years or even 50 years, maybe all the education you got was stopped at 16 or 15. But I think that by the time these kids are graduating from high school, they will be so equipped with the gospel. They will be equipped with the education that they need to be the men and women of God. We don't have to worry about college. We don't have to worry. I think God's got it from there. When I was over there on Thursday, there was a young man that came into the village, and he was making bracelets, and I bought a bracelet from him, and I shared the gospel with him. His name's Edward, and he prayed the sinner's prayer. He got down on. He didn't pray it right then and there. He got down on his knees and talked to God that night. And the next day he came back, and he wanted, and he started making bracelets for everybody. He had hand weaved me a basket for my wife and I bought some more bracelets from him, and he made me a custom bracelet. I'm not wearing it tonight. I got the Zambia flag bracelet on tonight. But he hand weaved me a bracelet. He wanted me to leave right then and there and go to his house, walk to his house and pray over his wife and his children. And I wanted to go. Some of the leaders wouldn't let me go. They said, but I was ready to do it right then and there. And I guess he lived 10 to 15 minutes away. And then I told him if I could meet up with him tomorrow and do it, but it just didn't work out. I didn't make it to him to pray for but I've been praying for his wife and his children, I think, just about every day since then. And we had 50 people in our class. It was between 48 and 54 kids, and my wife and I had 3rd and 4th grade combined. And every morning I would give them a Bible story, and I described it, just like I tell my kids stories at night, and I get them excited when it's exciting part, and I get them afraid when it's a fearful part, and I just tell them how it is. And on Friday, I gave them the gospel. I didn't sugarcoat it at all. And in America, in the churches, I think the gospel is so sugar-coated. They say, come to church, we got a volleyball team, or we got a nice coffee shop, and if you just come to Jesus, you're going to have peace and joy and love and happiness and all this stuff. That's just all the sugar coating, topping. But what they need to hear, and what I told them, is that without God, they're not going to make it. And that wide is the path that leads to destruction, and many will go down that path. And narrow is the path that leads to God, and few will go down that path. And at the end of that, I pointed out how I asked them to be honest with me, and these are 3rd and 4th graders. These are kids Lincoln's age. Some of them were 12, 13 because they were a little behind, but they were all smaller than Lincoln because they didn't have the food, I guess, that they had before they joined. I asked them, I said, I want you to be honest with me. I want you to raise your hand if you've ever told a lie. And so the whole class raised their hand. And I asked them, well, what do you call someone that tells lies? And one of them said a liar. And I said, have you ever stolen anything? And I want you to be honest. And the whole class raised their hand. I said, what do you call somebody that steals? Thief. I said, we've only covered 2 of God's 10 commandments. But the Bible says if you just break one of them, you've broken all of them. And when it was done, I gave him, before it all started, I told him, I said, Jesus called everybody publicly, If you're too ashamed to stand up and come down here and say, I want to follow Jesus, then Jesus is going to be too ashamed to tell his Father that he knows you. And you can't care what the person next to you thinks. You can't care what the people at work think. You can't care what your buddies that you're talking to on a Friday before you leave think. You have to care what God thinks. And you got to have fear, but the only fear that you can have is a healthy fear of God. And if you have that healthy fear of God, you won't be afraid to stand up to this world and tell them who you serve. And I didn't tell him, I told him a different story, and I'm telling you guys, it was catered towards 3rd and 4th graders, but I didn't tell them it was going to be easy. And at the end of that, they all stood up and came forward. And God worked through me. I have nothing. I'm just an auto mechanic. But for almost 2 years, when I pray, I say, God, use me. And there was a man, and I didn't want to go because I had varicose veins in my legs from standing and working on cars for 25 years. And the doctor said, oh, well, you could get a blood clot, on a plane ride that long. And then I see Pastor George go after having a surgery, literally just had a surgery, and he's going. And I went because my wife needed me, wanted my support. It wasn't on my radar, it was on her radar for her and her son and our son to go. And when I was there, I met a man named Robert. And he was a vet. I believe he was in the Vietnam War. But he was 79 years old. And him and his wife were on this mission trip, and I thought, how in the world did they take that plane ride that I just took, And I remember telling him, I said, if you just keep serving God, I think you might live forever. And I don't believe that our retirement is on the earth. And that's why the Bible says not to store up things that'll rust away and that moth will eat and destroy on this earth. We're supposed to store up treasure in heaven, and that's where our retirement's at. And if you can breathe, if you can walk, if you got breath in your lungs, you can tell people about God.
One of the common refrains from Phil this week, or a couple weeks ago, was, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just an auto mechanic. How many times did you say that, Phil? Too many. Too many. And what did Dan tell you every time? You were meant to be here, something like that, right? Phil, the whole week that we're there, outmodeled evangelism past me and George, past everyone else on that trip. We go to a roadside store to buy some knickknacks. And I go in, oh, you want to charge me $300 for that? No, $200. And I'm still getting ripped off, right? And so I do the business, and we get back on the bus and we leave. And Phil, everywhere he goes, is asking them about the gospel, asking them if they believe, whether it's at the school, whether it's in town, doesn't matter. We end up waiting on Phil all over the place because he's having gospel conversations. And we rag on him a little bit, give him a hard time. Phil, you're holding up the bus. But what he models is just being an auto mechanic. Me and George are full-time vocational ministers. We get to do this full-time and get paid for it. But it doesn't matter your vocational role or your duty or if you're retired, right? If we are a born-again believer, we all have that same commission. We all have that same mission where in every moment of our lives, looking at the world, the lost world around us, the perishing world around us, and being filled with compassion, sharing the gospel. You know, and I point out Phil, not just to make Phil all puffed up with pride, but as a testimony, right? You know, if me and George go and do some spiritually good thing as an example, like, cool, you can say, well, we were paid to do that, right? But Phil has modeled for you what it means just to be a willing servant. Oh, can I go on this trip? Yeah. Was it on my radar? No. But I can go. I have the time, I have the means, I have the opportunity. And God has called us all on the same mission. And how can I fill that out? And Phil's modeled that well and is convicting, for each one of us. Phil, and just that model, right? Just like even as a full-time minister, I don't share the gospel when I go to Walmart. I do use self-checkout, right? and so just that model, right, of everyday discipleship, everyday mission is so huge, right? We can go, you guys can all sign up for the trip next year, right? And that'd be awesome, cool. That'd be great, right? But
Even if you're 79.
Even if you're 79. You didn't even tell the whole story about Robert. Robert, how many mission trips had they gone on? Dozens? An insane amount. They gone to Guatemala, I think, 20 times. And he's 79. He's had all sorts of catastrophic health issues where he really should be dead. That's why Phil joked, if you keep serving the Lord, you might just live forever. Well, guess what? You will, right? If you faithfully serve the Lord, you will live forever, right? And we read that in Sunday school this morning, that if we are found to be good and faithful servants, we will have eternal life, right? But if we're not, if all 5 of us don't do anything until we go on the trip next year, are we being good and faithful servants? No, we're being occasional servants, saying, Lord, didn't we go to Zambia in your name? So it's just such a model, such an example, and I think it's so valuable not just to point at examples out in the world, but in our own congregation, right? Like Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
Can I just share with you quickly what a day looked like for us? We probably rose up around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. They tried to encourage us to always have a quiet time, which was really nice. And the guest house was very nice. As far as what the other people lived on, we had nice beds, we had air conditioning, running water.
But George, I had a cold shower a couple times.
Yeah, we had a cold shower a few times, but at least we had running water. And
it's pretty hard to complain about that when
so.
you immediately go into the village afterwards.
So we would do that every morning, and then we'd have breakfast. We always had a morning devotional. Somebody would share a morning devotional, and then we'd get on the bus. We'd head to BCA, and we'd start working in our various areas. Every one of us went to a different location to serve, and we served from about 9 till about 1:30 or 2. Lunch came when lunch came. It was Zambian time, so there was no set time as to when you would stop for lunch. You would just keep going until you started food coming into the room or somebody came and got you. And so we did lunch, and then we'd go right back into our classes and teach until about 4:30. They tried to get us to close down by 4 o'clock, 4:30, so we could get back on the bus and get back to our guest house and have dinner. And then after dinner, again, we'd have another testimonial time, and then we'd kind of have a debriefing. If somebody had problems or concerns or questions, they could ask then. We usually were back in our rooms, I'm guessing, by 8:30, 9 o'clock. By 9:30, George was in bed, but the rest of everybody was probably still out roaming around, but I was whipped for the day. But that was kind of the daily routine, but it was very, very nice. A bus was huge. Brent and Andrea, you know exactly what the bus looks like when we were over there, and so the bus was very crowded. We had, 23, I think, in our group, so the bus was packed from head to toe. Victor usually and Grace and his daughter usually rode with us. Chipo also rode with us, so that added 4 or 5 more people in the bus, and so it was always packed to the gills, coming and going to BCA. BCA, where we were located in the guest house and George compound, probably wasn't more than maybe a 30, 40-minute drive to and from, and I'm not sure if he's even that far for
Maybe
sure.
20.
20?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so pretty quick every time getting back and forth. But again, like Phil and everybody else has said, we ate like kings. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Everybody else on the compound had one meal a day, and that was at noon to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was made up of cornmeal, which they call shima, and shima is just cornmeal crushed and kind of made into a mush, a paste. And you dip your fingers in there and roll it into a ball, and then either dip it into kale or cabbage. It was kind of a cooked cabbage, cooked kale, tomatoes, onions, some kind of spices in there. You could roll all that in there. There sometimes were proteins. Proteins could be minnows. They could be chicken. They could be sausage. It just depended on the different days. And so I believe everybody had it. And I know everybody I watched, the pasture-wise, they ate almost everything in their packet of food. I couldn't eat half of it. It was just more than I could even think about, but I'm guessing they were probably so hungry they were willing to eat anything and everything they got, since that was the one meal they got all day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the kids would clear their plate. And my son and I, we ate it one day, and I thought it was really good. It looks like mashed potatoes, but it's cornmeal, and the children would line up to wash their hands, and they'd just turn on the big spigot for the well water. And the wells, so they have wells dug everywhere, and then the water comes up from the ground, and it's pumped into a large plastic water tower. This plastic container was probably 500 gallons maybe, and it's on like a steel welded platform made out of angle iron, and it would be a container that you would see on a farm, and then it's gravity fed, and then so they would just turn the water on, but they didn't waste any water. You know, they'd have a big bucket underneath catching the water, and the kids would just stand in line and go through and just wash their hands. And then from there, they walked around the corner into the first classroom where all the ladies had prepared the food. And they would get a hot meal instantly. And they had cooked this meal on charcoal over fires out in the open.
Yeah, so I wanted to point that out. As one of the slides here, you'll see just an area of dirt. There's a building on the right-hand side, and then there are these two giant pots. Looks like they're just standing on stands on this dirt area, open dirt area. That's the kitchen right now. That's where they cook. That's where all the food is cooked. So, ladies, this is your kitchen, right? I do the cooking in my house. I could not imagine doing that cooking, right? They're building a new kitchen. It's going to be much better, but it's going to be nowhere near what we're used to, right? They basically are going to have big charcoal braziers in a area of a building set apart for the cooking. I don't know how they're going to run the water, but anyway, it's going to be much better than just fires on a dirt ground out in the middle of nothing, right, out in the middle of the courtyard there. But that's how they cook the food for everybody who eats. And I want to just say a word about the minnows. They are minnows. They are real minnows. Now, I have a life rule that I don't eat things that look back at me. Okay? But Monday was minnow day. And I'm going, okay, Lord, am I real here? Am I genuine? Am I really going to eat this? And yes, I ate the minnows. Anybody else eat the minnows? Did not try the minnows? Well,
I had a granola bar in my bag. Kudos to you, though,
so
Christopher.
I just want to say they're minnows, okay? And everybody was just eating these things like you or I would eat a hamburger or something like that. It's just like, okay, this is just the food. And I'm going, all the time I'm eating them, I'm going, these are minnows, right? So that's normal for them, right? That's a normal protein. So Nishima, they've got the starch, they've got the iron and so on in the cabbage and the kale, whatever the greens are they're having that day, and then that's their protein for the day, and that's their protein for the day.
I think Lincoln and I ate on like a Wednesday or Thursday there, and they had sausage, and it was like Hillshire Farms. I mean,
It
that's
was
what it
good
tasted
stuff.
like. It was good.
I don't know about the minnows, but everything else was tasty.
Yeah, I missed that day.
I don't think I'm, if I go back, it's just like, I don't know if my goal will be minnow eating.
Yeah, Lincoln, did you like it?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Did you eat it all?
Yeah.
what was your favorite Zambian food you had all week?
All of it.
All right.
It was probably the
Very
chocolate
specific.
bar we picked up at the.
I said, oh, yeah, fair enough.
Yes.
The Cadbury
Yeah.
chocolate bars.
So nothing there tastes like over here. Not even when we went to the store and we got their Doritos. Yeah, their Doritos are like half the size and they don't taste anything like our Doritos. I think they're made in South Africa. And then the chocolate, I recommend that. We didn't make it back with any. We ate it all, but but
Now, you
Yes.
guys, so Amy is not here, so I'm going to harass Amy for a second. Every time Amy traveled this week, she got stopped. So we fly back. She has full-size scissors in her bag, and so she gets pulled off to the side, and they grab bunches of full-size scissors out. And so we're just like, Amy's on the terrorist list, number one. Then we get back to the U.S., and we go through customs, and, she gets this special tag. We get to go off to the special room where she is carrying meat product from Zambia, which is a big no-no. Beef jerky,
that was
though.
my fault. But I
Well,
wasn't
no, but
even-
Amy was the one carrying it. And so Amy's the one who has the note on her passport saying, tried carrying foreign bacteria into America.
Yeah, so I grabbed a couple bags of Zambian beef jerky. I think it was like on Wednesday or something, and I opened it and I was trying it on the bus, and yeah, I just left it in the backpack. I totally forgot all about it, and then I was over getting the bags, and so she was standing by my bag, and and then the little beagle flagged it, and he sniffed the bag, and so they opened the bag, and he just about jumped on that beef jerky, and so we got diverted to go through extra checks, and we had to get more scans and checks because we brought food.
Yeah.
back.
So Phil's on the Interpol list. I don't know what list Amy is on, but don't travel with the Wallachs. You'll get stopped.
Yeah, so so you wouldn't think you would get kicked out of London
England, yeah.
for spreading the gospel, but when I went there, they had just passed a law. It had literally passed the month before that if you're going to go to London, England, you're going to spread the gospel, you have to have a visa to be a missionary. And they were actually going to let me in because they had stamped my passport and sent it back down to the immigration lady. And she got so furious that she stomped up the stairs to this blacked out room and went in there, and I could see the outline of her waving at this guy. Anyway, I ended up getting deported just for not having a proper visa because they said I was going to be a missionary in London. And during that, and when I was over there, one of the pastors from one of the 6 churches that was there, he came up to me and he goes, God gave me a word, and I don't know what it means, but he said, well, the first part, he says, you were meant to be here. And the second part, I have no idea what it means, but he said, go back. And I thought about that the next day. So. No, they don't have. They absolutely loved it, and like the using the markers and the crayons. I mean, they were just you couldn't get them away from them, and they wouldn't leave their colored pictures and their projects. They wouldn't even leave them in the classroom. They wanted to take them with them constantly. and then the little battery operated light. They just absolutely love that.
Kind of like with the other stuff, it came a point of contention with some of them. I would look in the playground, and some of them would be harassing each other over, no, that's my tea light. No, it's your tea light. Back and forth a little bit about that. But these kids are just so in love with anything they get.
Richard? I believe they're going to try to end them the end of this year is what they're hoping, to have the hospital open and operational by the end of this year. Yeah, which is December, yeah. Because by December is summer months, so, great building time for them. We were over there in the winter months.
Was it the hospital, or was it just the main assembly hall?
No, it was the hospital.
Okay.
The hospital said
because
they're going to have it
the
open.
goal, they have the same contractor for both. The main assembly hall, which you've seen as the big hall, is unfinished. That will be finished, and then they'll finish up the hospital.
Yeah.
Or build the hospital, I should say.
Yeah.
So, did I interrupt?
Nope.
So it's not like United States. You need 50 yards of concrete. You just make a phone call. In fact, like the ladies that cooked us meals, the charcoal that they cooked on, that charcoal was made. In fact, we walked by a site where they were getting ready to start a fire to make the charcoal, and so everything is made from scratch. They had big piles of sand and dirt and stuff to mix together to make, the mortar. And I think the only thing that is changed is they get the concrete bricks now, the concrete blocks, instead of making the bricks.
Yeah, but even the cinder blocks, you go down the road and they're big cinder block factories, and it's like 2 kind of large huts. It's nice. It's not really a factory, and then their actual cinder blocks are 50% air. Just like if you thought our cinder blocks were a sign of poverty here in the U.S., their cinder blocks make it look like, man, that is some really solid concrete.
Any other questions? I don't want to keep you too, I know it's after 5 already, so I don't want to keep you too long. Do you have questions? It rains, I believe, in May, June is kind of their rainy season. When we were there, we never saw a drop of rain, I don't believe. It was pretty dry and dusty, and 75, 78 maybe during the day, 55 at night. So to me, it was nice weather. Yeah, that was winter.
It's winter time.
Yeah.
78's winter time.
And a lot of them were wearing heavy jackets because they were freezing to death at those temperatures. So, yeah.
Shirt, sweatshirt, all of that.
Yep.
And here we walk in shorts and T-shirts.
Yep.
It was amazing weather, absolutely amazing weather. My whole family, we're still on malaria medicine for 4 weeks since we get back. I think I saw like 5 mosquitoes the whole time I was there. It's wintertime. It's like 74 degrees. It's a nice, breezy, beautiful day. Come back here, and I lift something to drink, and I'm breaking a sweat. It's the humidity is not bad there, and it's wintertime. I think they have a rainy season that lasts 3 months, maybe. Yes, but we're at the perfect time is July.
Yeah. Thursday and Friday, we got kicked out of our room with the youth. We were meeting in the main hall. We got kicked out for the women's conference. And so we went and sat on a hill in the sun and taught for several hours out on a hill. Let me tell you, I am not going outside and teaching at all this summer. But there, it's just like, you know what? I'm just going to lay down over here and take a little nap. That sounds good. It's pretty nice.
You had another question, Bob?
They just started that. It looked pretty rough to me. It didn't, they had a garden behind the big building that we worshiped in that they just built, and they were trying to grow some kale and cabbage and some different vegetables and stuff like that there. Like they said, they have the chickens, and that's basically all the crops and livestock that they have. So that belonged to the school. Yeah, BCA has about 15, 20 acres across the road from one another. So, yeah.
So I watched their food preparation, and they had like very large canvas bags that they were cutting open to take all their green vegetables out, and they were putting it in like a large tote that they would run the water over it and clean it, and then they would take the huge tote of the green vegetables and take it over to another place where they were cutting it up. And I know that when I tried the boiled cabbage and tomatoes, it tasted like a medium salsa to me. It tasted really good. I thought the seasoning was great on all the food. I had, the day I ate, and the kids, these kids cleared their whole plate, and everybody eats with their hand, and it's like a large platter about like that they get, and it would be like what I would think is like camping utensils, the platter, and then they've washed their hands from the well water, and they get this big plate with a heaping pile of what looks like mashed potatoes, which is nashima cornmeal, and then they get their protein, and then they get their vegetable, and these kids were not only clearing their plate, they were drinking the juice from the salsa off their plate. I mean, that's how much that they want this food. And if we were just to see what the kids here at a public school do, I mean, that not only are they hungry for food over there, but they are so hungry for the gospel. I mean, you could go up and talk to anybody about God, and they are on fire. They are hungry to learn the truth of God's word.
One other thing, for those of you that have been over there, used to restrooms was a hole in the floor. Now they have actual toilets and running water to fill the toilets. So they've really improved a lot of their toiletry. They do have running water in the sinks. So at least the outhouses now are much better than what they were 4 years ago when we were there. So they're making improvements. They do have electricity on George compound. They don't have it on Labudo, but they do have it on George compound. So they do have electricity in all of the classrooms and the main dining hall and all of that area. So they're constantly adding to things. So
our classroom had 2 light bulbs, and one of them worked, but it wasn't needed. There were so many windows, and so much light came in, and I believe it's the sewers on a septic system. There was no odor or anything like that, and they had the bathrooms, that functioning bathrooms, and everything was clean. I saw how they prepared the food, and I saw how that the kids washed up, and they are just being taught so many life lessons along with the education and hearing the gospel. I wouldn't mind if my kids went to that school. They're being fed the truth, unlike public schools in this country.
if you remember right, we raised money for a septic system, and so that's where they've been able to do that. It's interesting plumbing over there, but it's so much improved from what it was. The pandemic is what caused them to have septic system. Otherwise, they just had holes in the ground, just like an outhouse used to be back when we were back in the 40s and 50s back here in the United States. So things have progressed quite a bit in Zambia. So.
Our team that went on the trip, 6 different churches across Missouri, and 5 from Missouri, 1 from Arkansas. So First Baptist DeSoto, Missouri, some guys from West Plains, from Matt Krause's church as well. So all over the place, mostly St. Louis side of Missouri and over there.
23 of us, 6 different churches represented, yeah.
You guys were talking about having power in your building. The assembly hall there is unfinished, as you can see, and there's no power. So what they've done is, for their keyboard and their speakers in there, they run maybe like a 20-gauge wire, little thin wire from another building through the window, and there's two wires, a green and a black. Both of them are hot, and they have a power strip, just like we would plug in the wall, and they just wrapped it around the prongs on the power strip, and that's what they used. And it's 240-volt there, too. So I'm just like, should I just? No, I shouldn't. But it's just hanging out there in the middle of the room. And I said, yeah, that's good. That's good.
I wish that we could have put video up on here. The children's voices, they sing so loud. It just echoes into your soul. I wouldn't be surprised if the entire village could hear these children sing. Many times they would just shut the music off and just let them sing. And I want to somehow get that video up on the screen so you guys can hear their voices and hear them worshiping God. And it'll bring you to your knees. I promise you that. They are so on fire for God. And my hope and my prayer is that America would become on fire with God. Unfortunately, so many places have to come under persecution for us for them to turn to God, and to become on fire for God.
Sure. I didn't have any kids ask me to come back with or come home with me, but I did have some of them ask for money. And of course, we were instructed not to give anybody money because of exactly what Ryan said. Anytime a child gets a gift, if anybody else finds out he has a gift, it becomes a bully system. Now, all of a sudden, the bigger kid on the block beats him up to get what he's got. And so you've got to be real careful with those things.
Yeah. No, they didn't ask. They wanted all the love that you could give them. If you can give them hugs, they want that. Just they want to hold your hand when they're walking beside you. They knew we were there for them. When the bus pulled up for the first time, I believe that they had started the service, and the children just saw the bus coming, and they literally ran out of that church building, and they ran towards the bus. And I give this bus driver credit. We had a bus driver the whole week, and he was so watchful. I even talked to him. He's Catholic, and he was so watchful for those kids. They would run so close to that bus and those wheels, and just wave their hands and just want to see us. But yeah, it's life-changing.
Yeah, I didn't have any kids ask me to bring them back, but for a lot of those kids, they will tell you very directly their biggest dream in life is be able to go to America. If you make it to America, you've made it in every way. And so, but what I did get asked dozens of times from kids of all ages is, are you going to be back in December? Are you going to be back in December? When are you going to be back? Are you going to be back next year? Are you going to be back in December? Why not? Why won't you come back? And so they just want to see us, want to be involved with us.
So speaking of the singing, in the pastor's conference on the second day, I had the men start by singing together. Right now, I don't know how you guys would do if I just said, okay, I'm going to take 20 men and we're going to sing together. How that would work out here, but I have a very poor recording on my phone. But the harmonies, the consistency, the call and response was just, heavenly. It was heavenly. And it was just all on the spot. No practice or anything like that. It was just incredibly beautiful. Speaking of people wanting to go to America, so we were at the mall. It's Ndola has a mall, actually has a couple malls. And one day we were in Ndola, we were at the mall, we were doing currency exchange and so on. I didn't need to do that, so I went and got an ice cream. And as I'm standing there at the ice cream shop, I noticed there's a young man. I put my wallet, which is an open wallet, on the counter, and he's looking at my wallet rather pointedly. And I realized he was interested in my ID. So I took it out and I handed it to him and I said, "Yeah, I'm from the United States." And he looked at it, Missouri. driver's license, and he thought that was pretty impressive. And so, I just said, we chatted for a moment, and he gave me back my ID, and I sat down with my ice cream cone, and he's just zoomed in and sat down next to me, and he wanted to talk about how to get to America, right? And so I was able to say, hey, don't do it illegally. It's just going to mess you up. Do legal immigration. There is legal immigration into America, so just do that, right? So yes, there is a desire for people from Zambia to come to America, but obviously that's not the goal of our ministry, nor is it to Americanize Zambia. Right? We don't want to turn them into another Western nation because of all the ills that we in the Western world have. So it has to be a Zambian thing there, right? And it's wonderful that it is. We visited there, but other than us being there, I don't think there were any other European people at the school compound at all. Were there? The third thing I wanted to mention, and this one would take some getting used to, it was a perfectly normal thing for a man to walk down the path or the road holding hands with another man. No funny business. They just did that. Now, I'll give a man a hug. I'll put my arm around a man's shoulder. But I don't know if I would ever get used to walking down the road holding somebody's hand.
I've been trying to tell Christopher, the Bible tells us to greet one another with a holy kiss.
Well, that's
We're
different,
not
right?
practicing that one yet.
That's not prolonged contact, all right? You know what I'm saying?
As long as it's short, it's fine.
You know, I grew up in the church, and I've seen churches split over silly things, I've seen churches fight over the kind of carpet they were going to have, and then when I looked for a church, I wanted to find a church that the people were real, I wanted to find a church where when people were on fire for God. And it's not the amount of people that go to the church. It's the type of people that go to that church. In the Bible, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. And I think there's so many churches that are just absolutely overflowing because the people that stand in the front, they give them they tell them what their itching ears want to hear. And Pastor George doesn't do that. He tells the truth. And then when people give, they want to give to a church that's that their money's gonna make a difference for God. And sometimes you go to such a big church, you think, well, my tithe wouldn't even cover a fraction of the electric bill or something. And I'm not saying don't tithe. God calls us to tithe. But if you give, I don't know if there's a more pure thing to give than to feed a child and to clothe a child and to give a child the gospel. And if I had the money, I would pay for every one of those kids right here, right now. I've got 4 kids at home, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to take care of them. And I'd like to take care. We're going to adopt a child. I'd like to adopt all of the children. We're going to support those children. There's nothing purer than that. There's private schools in this community that have $800 to $1,000 a month tuition, and that doesn't cover their lunches, doesn't cover their clothes, doesn't cover their shoes, it doesn't cover their ride to work. These kids walk to work, and they get clothing, and they get food, and they get the gospel of Jesus Christ for $72 a month. If I could figure out how to give $720 a month, I would do that.
Well, let's close there if you don't mind. I know it's 5:30 and your bottoms are getting sore and tired. So thank you for coming tonight. And if you have questions, we all are still here. You can catch us during the week or next Sunday, whichever, and ask any questions that you have. You're welcome to look at the stuff up here on the table. But just want to thank these guys for going. As far as I know, we'll try to get another team together next year. Ephraim did have hip replacement. You heard him speak several months ago. The surgery has gone really well for him. He's in physical therapy, so keep Ephraim in your prayers if you would. I know he'd greatly appreciate it. And so let's all stand together. Let's have a word of prayer. Ryan, you want to close us in prayer, brother, and then we'll close out tonight.
Let's pray. Father, we are just so thankful, Lord, that you have blessed us with your Son. And Lord, you have blessed these children with your Son as well. Lord, so many of them already know you. And Lord, even if they have one meal a day, Lord, you have given them daily bread. Lord, and you are master of their lives, and there is a heaven's worth of bountiful riches awaiting them. Lord, I just pray that you would continue to give each of us here at Gashland a spirit, a missionary spirit, Lord, just that we would see the people perishing around us in our community and around the world as well, Lord. Lord, help us be a church that is reaching the unreached. Lord, truly being a beacon for the broken. Lord, we love you. We thank you for your blessings. And it's in Christ's name that I pray. Amen.